A lot of these people are vehemently against Collins, but when we talk about Eamon de Valera, they just sidestep it. Like, is Eamon de Valera their hero then? Because Eamon de Valera is the one that walked out of the Dáil. He essentially began the civil war with that act. I don't want to have to make this video because I know instantaneously it's going to cause division in the chat, and people are so incensed by this topic, and it's interesting to see, but it's actually quite disconcerting because of the level of emotion and hatred that can come from some people. I find it quite disturbing, to be honest, especially the fact that it's 100 years on. This particular individual was assassinated, killed by his own countrymen. This is about Michael Collins, of course, and the main reason is to make this is because you get people saying that it's Michael Collins' fault for the partition. It's solely Michael Collins' fault. It has nothing to do with the fact that there was a plantation of Scottish and English lords into Ulster a couple of hundred years before. There was this massive divide between the two faiths, and this was the beginning, really, essentially, of creating a firm foundation for a mini country within the country. Is Collins to blame for the plantation of Ulster? Moving along, I won't go into all of that now because it's going to take way too long, but going right up until the Rising, and we all know about what happened with the War of Independence, Collins pretty much led things from Dublin, got him out of Dublin Castle, was a huge instrument in the military intelligence of the War of Independence, which we won essentially. The Act of 1920, which was an act that was the actual legal setting for the partition. Was Collins to blame for that as well, or was that not Britain, the royalty of Britain, at fault, at the House of Lords, or whatever you call them? Or was Collins involved with that as well? I'm very confused, because we went on and we won the War of Independence, even though it's technically a stalemate. And Eamon de Valera actually had his own meetings with the Prime Minister of the time, Lloyd George, which is never talked about. It's never talked about. Collins is to blame for the partition, but what happened with Eamon de Valera? Eamon de Valera went over to Lloyd George and had a private meeting where the Free State was mentioned. Was it mentioned by mistake? Was it mentioned on purpose? But yet, Eamon de Valera seems to get like a free pass.
Lloyd George pointed at a document that de Valera had brought over, which said at the top, Ser Stot na HÉireann. And Lloyd George said, well, what does that word mean? And de Valera replied, it's the Republic. And Lloyd George said, no, what does it directly mean? What's the exact translation? Now, Lloyd George clearly had his people working on this because it was a very clever question. And de Valera frowned a little and he said, well, I suppose the exact translation, Ser Stot, Ser Free, Free State. And Lloyd George went, aha, and thought to himself, that's something I can use later on.
Is Collins a saint, or did Collins make mistakes? Fucking right he did. He absolutely did. Collins was about 8 years younger than me when he was shot. Eamon de Valera lasted a long time in politics after this. And it's like in that Batman movie, The Dark Knight, live long enough to become the villain. Eamon de Valera didn't go, right? He went to the first meeting and he sent a group. People say it's Michael Collins' fault. Why aren't they saying Arthur Griffith's fault? Because he was the chairman of the delegation and he prioritised achieving a republic. He saw the treaty as a necessary compromise. What about Robert Barton, who was initially opposed to any compromise with Britain but reluctantly signed under pressure, apparently? He later became a staunch opponent of the treaty. Why did he sign? Did they force him? Eamon Duggan, a lawyer and close associate of Collins, he believed the treaty offered the best possible outcome under the circumstances. George Gavin Duffy, a lawyer who had defended Roger Casement, he initially supported the treaty but later grew disillusioned with it. And notably absent was Eamon de Valera, of course. Now, this all went back to the government that was set up at the time in Ireland, and it was voted for in favour of the treaty. So how is Collins to blame for all of these other people and all of Eamon de Valera's absence, all these other people that signed the Dáil actually voting for it, and as well, Northern Ireland actually opted out They opted out because the Government of Ireland Act in 1920 essentially created two parliaments in Ireland, one for Southern Ireland and one for Northern Ireland. The Anglo-Irish Treaty included a provision, Article 12, allowing Northern Ireland to opt out of the newly formed Irish Free State, and they did. December 8, 1922, the Parliament of Northern Ireland, with its unionist majority, formally exercised this option and voted to remain within the United Kingdom. This decision was driven by the desire of Ulster Unionists to maintain their ties with Britain and avoid being part of a predominantly Catholic state. Was Michael Collins to blame for all that as well? Hence why I talked about the Partition of Ulster. This is what colonisers do. Colonisers invade a place, take it over, and plant their own stuff into it, and it grows and grows and grows before you know it, it's not your country. That's what colonizers do. So is Collins to blame for all that as well, or can people just understand what I'm trying to get at here? Collins was a part of this whole story, but he wasn't to blame. It's a complex interplay of personalities, political manoeuvring, ultimately that led to the partition of Ireland being cemented. While Collins is often seen as a key figure, it was a decision made by many, both in Dublin and Belfast. How is he to blame for all of that? And I know other people are going to come in and they're going to say, well, he turned the guns on his own people. That's the part of the Civil War that came afterwards. And do I agree with all that? No, I don't. I don't agree with it. But what were they meant to do? Did we want to stay in Britain? Did we want to continue in Britain after winning the War of Independence? Did we want to continue? Did we want to go into an all-out war with Britain? Is that what you think would have been better? Do you think we would have gotten a republic? Did you think we would be talking about unifying the land? Do you think that we would be at that point now, or would we be still part of Britain? The reality is it's a hundreds and hundreds of years long situation with the colonizers of Great Britain, and that's what happened. I'm not saying Collins was perfect, I'm not saying Collins was wrong at different times, but he did what he needed to do along with all the other people. They saw it as the right way forward. And I talked with a guy one time, I won't mention where he's from or anything like that, and he was a staunch, as we say here in Ireland, rawhead. Staunch. And I asked him, I said, what do you think Collins should have did? He said he did what he thought was best. Do I agree with it? No. Do I think we could have done something better? Maybe. He basically said to me that he thought that was the best thing to do. He was under pressure. What the hell were they going to do? In reality, a lot of these people are vehemently against Collins, but when we talk about Eamon de Valera, they just sidestep it. Is Eamon de Valera their hero then? Because Eamon de Valera is the one that walked out of the Dáil. He essentially began the Civil War with that act.